Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the absolute most chilling and honestly enduring mysteries of the modern era. We're heading back to the freezing winter of 1959, deep in the remote northern Ural Mountains of the former Soviet Union. It was there that 9 highly experienced hikers lost their lives under circumstances so profoundly bizarre that they've literally baffled historians, scientists, and mountaineers for well over 60 years.
Okay, let's dive into this. Because this single phrase is exactly what set the world's imagination on fire, an unknown, compelling natural force. That was the official, deeply ambiguous conclusion from the original Soviet investigation. And, it explained absolutely nothing. Instead, this eerie lack of clarity created a massive void of information, fueling over 6 decades of wild conspiracies and fierce debate about what actually happened on that freezing mountain.
To really get why this case is so captivating, you've got to look at the sheer impossibility of the scene itself. I mean, picture this. You're in a desolate, freezing wilderness where the temperature has plummeted to below minus 30 degrees Celsius. You're inside a safe, large canvas tent. Yet something terrifying prompts you to flee out into the deadly cold, leaving behind your boots, your heavy coats, and all your essential survival gear. It defies every logical instinct, especially for seasoned survivalists.
Section 1. The Mountain of the Dead, setting the scene in 1959.
Right off the bat, we need to understand that these victims were not amateurs making foolish rookie mistakes. They were highly skilled engineering students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, and they were going for the highest certification available in Soviet hiking that requires immense technical ability. So, looking at the timeline, the expedition began in late January 1959. 10 hikers originally set out, led by a 23-year-old named Igor Dyatlov, who was widely known for his exceptional leadership and outdoor expertise. But shortly into the trek, one hiker developed health problems and had to turn back. And that difficult decision? Well, it made him the sole survivor. The remaining 9 pressed on, and by February 1st, they had pitched their tent on an exposed mountain slope.
The specific location they chose was the eastern slope of Kolat-Syakhl, which translates from the local Mansi language to Mountain of the Dead. Now, I know it sounds incredibly ominous, almost like a warning straight out of a horror movie. But it's really crucial we pivot away from the supernatural right here. The name simply references the mountain's incredibly harsh, barren environment. It has absolutely nothing to do with any sort of haunted or supernatural tradition.
Section 2. A baffling discovery. The search operation.
And this brilliantly illustrates the macabre sequence of discoveries made by the search party. When the group didn't return on time, days went by before volunteers and military personnel scoured the region. What they eventually found 1.5 kilometers away from the campsite was deeply unsettling. It started with their abandoned tent, partially buried on that exposed slope. But the tent hadn't been unzipped. It was actually sliced open from the inside. Following a trail of footprints left by people in just socks or even barefoot, searchers walked downhill. Down there, by a large cedar tree, they found 2 bodies clad only in light clothing, next to a tiny burnt-out fire. And then, between that tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were discovered, perfectly positioned as if they were desperately trying to crawl back to camp.
But the mystery only deepened months later when the spring thaw finally exposed a snow-filled ravine. Here, the final 4 hikers were found, and their condition was just bizarre. They had severe internal injuries, we're talking fractured ribs and skulls, but with comparatively limited external wounds. And strangest of all, they were missing soft facial tissue, and one hiker was actually missing her tongue. This gruesome discovery really pushed the tension of the whole mystery to its absolute peak.
Section 3. Decades of speculation. Filling the void of information.
So, with physical evidence this bizarre, it's completely understandable why people jump to wild conclusions. You mix a closed-off Soviet state releasing barely any information with a truly inexplicable crime scene, and you've got the perfect storm for conspiracy theories to just multiply. The noise surrounding this case was deafening. Theories were flying everywhere, from hostile attacks by the local Mansi people to secret Soviet military weapons testing, glowing orange lights in the sky, and of course, extraterrestrial encounters. But it's super important to note that modern historians overwhelmingly reject these theories. Why? Because there was zero evidence of any struggle, no unfamiliar footprints, and the Mansi people were actually incredibly peaceful and even helped with the search.
In fact, we can easily dismantle one of the most famous rumors from the case right now, the radiation. Sensationalized accounts love to claim that radioactive clothing proves some secret Cold War nuclear event. But modern analysis? It shows the measured levels were relatively low, and at least one member of the group had previously worked in environments involving radioactive materials. So it was just occupational exposure, plain and simple. So, if we strip away all the paranormal noise and the conspiracies, we're left with a very real, very physical puzzle. The big question is, can modern science step in and finally explain the unexplainable?
Section 4. Science solves the mystery. The 2021 findings.
This is where things get really fascinating. In recent years, a massive shift from speculation to hard science has completely changed everything we know about this case. In 2021, an international team of researchers published a pivotal study using modern snow science, forensic evidence, and super advanced computer simulations. They presented what's called the delayed slab avalanche model. Basically, when the hikers pitched their tent, they cut into the slope, which weakened the snowpack. Over the next few hours, really violent winds deposited a massive amount of additional snow uphill. Eventually, the pressure just became too much, and a dense, heavy slab of snow, literally weighing hundreds of pounds per cubic meter, suddenly collapsed directly onto the campsite. This hyper-localized avalanche partially crushed the tent in pitch darkness, convincing the group they were facing an immediate, life-threatening danger that required instant evacuation.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how easily science unravels the absolute most horrifying aspects of the scene. The missing tongue and facial tissue, while gruesome, that is completely standard natural scavenging and decomposition for bodies left exposed in harsh snow and ice for months. And those severe internal injuries without the external wounds, well, computer models definitively prove that intense compression, like from falling into a ravine and being struck by dense, heavy snow, generates precisely those types of blunt force internal fractures.
But wait, what about the clothing? Why on earth were they found out in the snow, half naked? This brings us to a biological reality known as paradoxical undressing. As your core body temperature plummets and advanced hypothermia sets in, your judgment deteriorates rapidly. The victim's perception of temperature becomes entirely distorted, a glitch in the nervous system, causing them to suddenly feel burning hot. So as a result, they strip off their clothing despite the lethal cold around them. It looks entirely irrational to us looking back, but medically it's a very well-documented reaction to freezing to death.
When you put all this evidence together, it builds a complete, deeply empathetic reconstruction of their final hours. They fled the avalanche toward the forest to find shelter from the violent wind. They logically attempted to build a survival fire by that cedar tree. When conditions seemed maybe slightly better, 3 members bravely tried to return to the tent to retrieve their gear, but tragically died of sheer exhaustion and cold on the way. The remaining 4 searched for better shelter but fell into a deeply concealed ravine in the pitch black. You see, these weren't crazy actions. These were logical survival tactics utterly overwhelmed by an extreme, unforgiving environment.
Section 5. The Power of Nature. Lessons from the Ural Mountains.
So, the crucial point is this. Ultimately, uncovering the truth behind the Dyatlov Pass incident is way less about solving a spooky mystery and much more about learning a profound lesson in scientific humility. Nature does not need the supernatural to be overwhelmingly powerful and deadly. Snow, wind, extreme cold, darkness, and just a single moment of immense environmental stress can interact in really complex ways to transform a routine expedition into a fatal disaster within mere minutes.
The memory of Igor Dyatlov and his incredible team should inspire deep respect, not cheap sensationalism. They were brave, highly trained explorers who just happened to encounter a tragically perfect storm of natural hazards. Which leaves us with this final humbling thought to consider. If even the most skilled outdoor professionals can be completely overwhelmed by nature in a matter of minutes, how truly prepared are any of us when we decide to step out into the wild?